With the 19th pick in the 2009 NBA Draft, the Atlanta Hawks select Jeff Teague from Wake Forest University.
You might know Jeff Teague from his Club 520 podcast. You might just know him from TikTok clips, and that's okay. Jeff Teague is arguably the funniest basketball player ever, and he is an incredible storyteller. If you watch his podcast or if you just see his TikTok clips, I think he's absolutely hilarious, and I love listening to his stories. But in this video, I'm going to correct a massive mistake in modern basketball culture, and I'm going to be diving into the career of Jeff Teague, who has become one of the most beloved figures in sports media today. But I think his actual on-court greatness is being completely erased by his own memes. I'm going to be breaking down the tape on Jeff Teague. Now, if you go on TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube Shorts right now, you'll see Jeff Teague everywhere. If you have a similar For You page or a similar feed to mine. The man is a storytelling genius. On his podcast, Club 520, he routinely tells these hilarious, self-deprecating stories about getting absolutely demolished by peak Derrick Rose, or getting crossed by Kyrie Irving, or getting screamed at by Jimmy Butler. He has created this public persona of a regular, casual guy who just happened to bumble his way into an NBA career. But listen to me very carefully, and don't let his jokes fool you, because Jeff Teague was an absolute problem on the basketball court. You do not stumble your way into a 12-year NBA career, and you don't accidentally become the starting point guard and engine of a historic 60-win team. You don't stumble into an all-star appearance, and you don't stumble into 9 consecutive playoff trips and an NBA championship ring. Now, in this video, I will be doing constructive criticism. I'm not going to be, being super hype about Jeff Teague. I'm not going to be, super negative either. I'm going to be like 100% honest feedback. And I'm going to just describe and break down how truly great of a player Jeff Teague was on the basketball court. During the mid-2010s, Jeff Teague was one of the most lightning-fast, tactically sound, and physically fearless paint-touch creators in the entire league. He was a pioneer of the modern spread pick-and-roll era, a guard who possessed a first step so lethal it forced elite defensive schemes to completely warp just to keep him out of the lane. But his career is also a masterclass in the thin line between an elite starter and a true superstar. This video will be looking past the podcast clips, and it will be looking at the cold hard tape. I'm going to be breaking down the massive advantages he brought to an offense, the silent flaws that limited his ceiling, and provided the definitive analytical breakdown of just how good Jeff Teague actually was. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more daily NBA content, because these videos do take a very long time to produce. But other than that, let's get straight into the film. Now, to understand the absolute baseline of Jeff Teague's basketball identity, you have to understand his athletic pedigree. In modern media, Teague talks about himself like he was unathletic compared to the elite tier of point guards. But if you turn on his early tape from Wake Forest or his few years in Atlanta, the raw data tells a completely different story. Teague was an athletic anomaly in terms of lateral and linear acceleration. He possessed a world-class first step, and in the late 2000s at Wake Forest, Teague was an All-American honorable mention, averaging nearly 19 points a game in the toughest conference in America. When the Atlanta Hawks drafted him 19th overall in 2009, they knew they were getting raw, developmental speedster. For his first 2 seasons, he sat behind a veteran, traditional floor general in Mike Bibby. But when Bibby was traded and Teague was handed the keys to the franchise during the 2011 playoffs against the Chicago Bulls, the entire league essentially stood up. If you go back and watch the 2011 Eastern Conference semifinals, Jeff Teague was thrust into the starting lineup to guard the reigning peak MVP version of Derrick Rose. Anyone else would have collapsed, but instead Teague used that series as his national coming out party. He didn't stop Rose. Nobody could. But he checked Rose's historic speed with his own relentless burst. He averaged nearly 15 points and 6 assists in that series, proving that he did belong on the big stage. I know those aren't crazy numbers or anything, but it's not like he had a complete dud throughout that series. The fundamental advantage Teague possessed at his peak was his ability to gain instant paint penetration without needing a screen. In isolation or secondary transition, Teague didn't need to execute complex multi-dribble combinations like Kyrie Irving or Kemba Walker. He used a simple, devastating hesitation dribble, dipped his shoulder, and was at the rim before the help defender could rotate. Because he could get his chest into the paint at will, he completely distorted the first line of the opposing defense. He was a human wrecking ball against structural point of attack coverage. This brings us to the absolute peak of Jeff Teague's career, the 2014 to 2015 Atlanta Hawks. This Atlanta Hawks team won 60 games and captured the number 1 seed in the East, and they had all 5 starters named Eastern Conference Player of the Month simultaneously. History looks back at that team as a beautiful, starless ecosystem, often called Spurs East. But make no mistake, because Jeff Teague was the best player on that roster, is arguably, it could be up for debate, but I believe that he was the best player on that roster. The Atlanta Hawks were built on pace and space. They started Al Horford and Paul Millsap, 2 big men who could step out and shoot the 3 alongside DeMarre Carroll and the greatest gravity shooter in the era, Kyle Korver. Because the paint was completely empty, Jeff Teague was placed in the ultimate basketball sandbox. Let's break down the exact mechanics of why Teague was a top-tier pick-and-roll advantage creator in this system. Off the high drag screen, Al Horford pops up to set a high screen at the logo, and because Horford can hit the mid-range and the 3, his defender cannot sag deep into the paint, so they are forced to play at the level of the screen. With the snake in corner manipulation, Teague utilizes his elite first step to turn the corner. If his primary defender fights over the top, Teague snakes the screen, cutting laterally across the floor to lock the defender on his hip, completely neutralizing them. This is where the gravity collapses, with the big man forced to step up and stop Teague's float game. The weak side wing defender must drop into the paint to cover Horford rolling or popping. The moment that help defender leaves Kyle Korver in the corner, Teague fires a pinpoint one-handed skip pass directly into Korver's shooting pocket. This wasn't just simple point guard play. It was a high-level spatial manipulation. Teague averaged 7 assists per game during this peak stretch, with a career-high scoring output of 15.9 points. He was an elite decision-maker who understood how to weaponize his teammates' shooting gravity. He developed a highly lethal floater game. Because he was small, if rim protectors dropped back, he could drop a soft teardrop over the outstretched arms of elite shot blockers. He was an all-star in 2015 because he perfectly balanced individual scoring threat with unselfish system distribution. He was an elite Tier 2 point guard who could execute a flawless modern offense. But to give a truly honest breakdown of Jeff Teague, we have to look at the other side of the ledger. We have to analyze the structural disadvantages and the tactical limitations that prevented him from crossing over into the elite Tier 1 superstar category with guys like Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook, or Stephen Curry. The first major disadvantage in Teague's profile was his variable pull-up shooting gravity. While Teague was a serviceable three-point shooter throughout his career, hovering around 35% to 36% from beyond the arc, he was primarily a catch-and-shoot threat or a set-shot shooter. He never fully mastered the dynamic off-the-dribble pull-up three-pointer that defines the modern elite guard. When defenses shifted into playoff mode, elite coaches like Tyronn Lue or Eric Spoelstra noticed that instantly. In a 7-game series, opponents would go under the high screen against Teague. They would dare him to pull up from 26 feet off the dribble. Because he wasn't completely comfortable launching those shots at a high volume, it allowed the defense to sag, taking away his driving lanes and effectively clogging up the beautiful spacing that the Hawks relied on. The second core disadvantage was a psychological and physical habit that his podcast fans will find hilariously ironic. Teague was an overpasser who over-dribbled in isolation. On the podcast, Teague often jokes about not wanting to take the big shot because he didn't want the media heat. If you look at the tape, there is a grain of truth to that. Teague was a highly systematic player. If an isolation play broke down, he had a tendency to pound the ball into the hardwood, resetting the offense with 8 seconds left on the shot clock rather than physically imposing his will on a defender. He lacked that irrational, hyper-aggressive scoring mentality that teams need when a beautiful system breaks down in the fourth quarter of a playoff game. He was a great executor of a system, but he was rarely a savior outside of a system. After the 60-win Hawks team was eventually dismantled by LeBron James' Cleveland Cavaliers, Jeff Teague entered the second phase of his career, the elite, high-value floor general for hire. And this is where you see exactly how respected he was by front offices across the league. In 2016, he went to the Indiana Pacers to play alongside Paul George. He started all 82 games, averaging nearly 8 assists and pushing a competitive team into the postseason. In 2017, Tom Thibodeau signed him to a massive 3-year, $57 million contract in Minnesota to be the veteran adult in the room for a young Karl-Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins alongside Jimmy Butler. Look at that 2017-2018 Timberwolves tape. That team had historic offensive rating, and Teague was the one organizing the chaos. He was the one managing the volatile locker room dynamic between Butler and the young stars, ensuring the ball moved and breaking a historic 13-year playoff drought for the state of Minnesota. Even as his speed began to naturally decline in his early 30s due to minor knee injuries, his baseline value as a high IQ, low turnover playmaker kept him as a hot commodity. And then comes the ultimate validation, which was the 2021 Milwaukee Bucks. Now, don't get me wrong, by 2021, Teague was a backup veteran behind Drew Holiday. He wasn't playing 35 minutes a night anymore, but go back and watch the Eastern Conference Finals against the Atlanta Hawks, which was his old team. Drew Holiday got into deep foul trouble, which means in Game 6, Teague stepped onto the floor and hit multiple massive, timely three-pointers, orchestrated the secondary unit, and helped propel the Bucks into the NBA Finals. When he hoisted that Larry O'Brien trophy at the end of the 2021 season, it wasn't a charity ring, it was a career lifetime achievement award for a guard who had spent over a decade providing elite structural value to winning organizations. He proved that even when you lose your elite first-step athleticism, your intellectual processing of the game can still net you a ring at the highest level. So let's bring in the jury and deliver the final verdict. How good was Jeff Teague actually? If your entire knowledge of Jeff Teague comes from watching his podcast clips, you are missing out on one of the most efficient, lightning-fast point guard peaks of the 2010s. Jeff Teague wasn't a bench warmer who got lucky. He was a lethal point-of-attack slasher, a brilliant spatial passer, and the floor general of a historic 60-win basketball empire. He wasn't Steph Curry, he wasn't Russell Westbrook, he wasn't Chris Paul. He didn't have the superstar pull of gravity to carry a franchise completely on his back to a title as the number one option. That was his disadvantage. But if you put him inside a high-level system with shooting around him, he was a statistical engine that guaranteed you a spot in the postseason. The next time you see a clip of Jeff Teague laughing on Club 520 about getting cooked by some superstar, just remember this. The only reason he was on the floor to get cooked by those legends is because he was a legend in his own right to everyone who actually watches the film. Behind all of the self-deprecating jokes sits one of the most respected, accomplished guards of his generation. But I do want to hear from you guys. Where do you rank Jeff Teague among the point guards of his specific era? Do you remember that 60-win Hawks team, or are you just here for the podcast stories? Let's get a real basketball debate and a real discussion going down in the comments. Please do me a massive favor and smash the like and subscribe button with notifications turned on so you don't miss any more videos, because I do be posting daily, and as always, these videos do take a very long time to produce, but I do appreciate every single one of y'all, and I'll see you guys in the next video.